Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's daily devotional. Let's get this centered. There we go. So our daily devotional today is going to come from 1 Kings chapter 19. It's going to be a relatively short daily devotional today. Again, yesterday I didn't mean to go as long as I did, so I'm going to try to keep it short today. So 1 Kings chapter 19, this is after the events of chapter 18 with Mount Carmel. Elijah has kind of made the children of Israel make a choice between Baal and Jehovah. And after the end of chapter 18, Elijah has killed the prophets of Baal with a sword, or at least ordered them to be killed. Whether or not Elijah physically took a sword and killed them all, or ordered them to be killed, go either way on that. But then starting in chapter 19 verse 1, it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life, and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die, and said, It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. When he says, I'm no better than my fathers, I think what he's describing here is the fact that all of his fathers are they're dead. And as far as he's concerned, I mean, he might as well be dead as well, because people are chasing after him. And as far as he is aware that, when Jezebel finds him, she's going to kill him. And it is interesting that Elijah doesn't immediately pray or immediately talk to God, and I don't know what all's in Elijah's mind right now. And it also seems as though it's not like it's been a revolution against Ahab and Jezebel. The people still are. It's not like Elijah's in charge now. So still Ahab and Jezebel, the ones in charge. And so when she threatens his life, he runs. So verse 5, Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. And then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Kind of strange situation. An angel wakes you up and, hey, I made you some food. The angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. I don't know if there was something special in that food and drink that gave him the strength for 40 days and 40 nights, but it sounds as though that's how long he went without, at least without food. I don't know if that this means that he fasted in terms of not eating for 40 days and 40 nights, or if he didn't eat or drink for 40 days and 40 nights. Obviously, even Jesus, he fasted in the wilderness, but that's not without water. Got to have water every couple of days or we die. So it's kind of interesting that Elijah, there may be something miraculous here if this is including the drink, but it is similar or parallel to the 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness. So then in verse 9 it says, There he went into a cave and spent the night at that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? This dialogue between Jehovah and Elijah is very interesting. Here he comes to Mount Horeb, and God asks him, What are you doing here? And so Elijah says in verse 10, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. And then he said, this is God speaking, verse 11, Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains, and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And so it was when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts." And he says the exact same thing that he said earlier. Verse 15. The Lord said to him, "Go, return to on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria. Also you shall anoint Jehu the son of Nimshi as king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah you shall anoint as prophet in your place. And it shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill. Whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." There are two main parts to this account from verses 1 through verse 18. There's some curious points in here as well that we're not going to spend any time on. But there in verse 18, obviously, that is it's a point that's very encouraging, that God kind of refocuses Elijah, tells him what he wants him to do, and then at the very end, verse 18, he says, "And by the way, you think that you're the only one left, but there are 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal." And Elisha had no idea. Apparently, or Elijah had no idea that there were 7,000 in Israel that had not bowed the knee to worship Baal. And Elijah thought he was the last one. So obviously there's an application here about, first of all, that God knows who his people are. He knows those who are willing to stand for truth, to do what's right, even when no one else may know. God knows. And then there's a second application in that sometimes life can be such that sometimes we feel like we're the only ones left, or that there are only a few of us who are trying to do what's right and are truly seeking to serve God and be true to his word, when in fact that's not true either. Now, it's not to say that there are millions of us necessarily, but it does mean that in the midst of all of the thousands that were worshiping Baal, there were 7,000 who weren't. And God always has a remnant of individuals who are willing to serve God. Now, that being the case, all those applications, and verse 18 is a wonderful part of this account. It usually gets the most attention. But what really makes me curious is verse 11 and 12. How that God tells Elijah, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." So he comes out of the cave, and it says, "Behold, the Lord passed by, a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces." But you would think that this is something perhaps even stronger than a tornado, a whirlwind of some kind, that a twister that is so powerful that it's breaking the rocks. But it says that the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. Now, there's a lot of things that have been said about this, and I think there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this, but perhaps one of the most obvious is the fact that God wasn't in the earthquake, he wasn't in the fire, he wasn't in this incredible strong wind. So where is God? Well, first of all, God is everywhere, but with regard to the actual account, God is the still small voice. And a lot of times we picture God issuing judgments from the throne in heaven, thunders and lightnings, and this is how it's portrayed in Revelation, with God sitting at the throne in heaven, and Jesus sitting at the throne in heaven, and all these lightnings and thunderings issuing forth from heaven. And that's absolutely true. It's not to say that God's power isn't at work. It is. But that's kind of the point of verse 11, is all of this power. But God is not the power. in the sense of verse 11, that God isn't in the wind. He isn't the fire. He isn't the earthquake. But God controls them. What is God? God, verse 12, would seem to be, at least according to this account, God is portraying himself, or at least presenting himself, in this still small voice. And it kind of, it's very interesting because there's a lot of ways to look at this, a lot of applications from it. But here you have what seems to be a very chaotic event. A huge strong wind, an earthquake, and fire. All things dealing with nature, which certainly God controls, and God is over them all. God controls them all. But God shows forth his power in many ways. And in the midst of chaos, in the midst of things happening in life that we have no control over, and we have no control over strong winds, we have no control over the earthquakes, or in some cases fires, where is God? God is the still, small voice. I don't think there's any other time, somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think there's any other time in the entire Bible, Old or New Testaments, where God is presented by the means of a still small voice. And you think about that for a minute, and it gives you this sense of comfort. It gives you this sense of calm, this sense of complete control. Here's Elijah. He's going through this very chaotic time. He's and not to, in any sense. There's a lot of emotion involved. Okay. This is an emotional time for Elijah. There's a lot of things happening with the children of Israel. Ahab and Jezebel are after him. He thinks he's going to die. He might as well die now. He thinks he's the only one left. And out of all of that, remember we said, it's interesting that Elijah doesn't immediately bow down to pray as soon as he gets that message from Jezebel. But he runs. And apparently it's been 40 days and 40 nights, presumably. And then after all of that, and then God shows forth all of his power, God speaks in a still, small voice. Now, what does it say? I don't know. It doesn't say what the still, small voice says, other than verse 13, that when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And then a voice came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Now, is it still that still, small voice speaking? Verse 13, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I don't know. But it is interesting that the still, small voice, it's as if God is making a point. I am in control, Elijah. All of these elements, all of these things, this power that he has shown repeatedly, that Elijah knows full well that God has. God is the still small voice. Not to say that he's not powerful. It's not to say that he isn't all powerful and the creator of all things, and that he doesn't have all authority. And yet, God is in control. God is aware of everything that's happening. And God wanted Elijah to refocus, to reset himself, and do his job. And that's exactly what God tells him to do. He says, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back, and I want you to, he talks about Hazael, what's his name? Hazael, verse 15, and then Jehu. So you go back and do your job. And then verse 18, you're not alone. There are 7,000 who are with you. And there's such a, I don't know, it's such an encouraging, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I read especially those verses 11 on through verse 18, and there's such encouragement in this account. There's such a reminder that God is in charge, that no matter how chaotic life may be, God is in control. God has all power, and that still small voice speaks even today and reminds us that I care for you. 1 Peter 5, verse 7. Cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. That still small voice can help us to refocus. It can help us to keep perspective or reapply our perspective to remember that we're here to serve him. And he's always watching. He's always aware of what's going on. And in the times we need him the most, Certainly we need him all the time, but in these difficult times and times where things seem chaotic, remember that still small voice. God speaking from heaven saying, I'm here. And I just think there's a lot of power in this account. And Elijah, he goes and does what he's supposed to do from that point on. All right. That's the daily devotional for you today. I hope that that's something encouraging and edifying to think about with Elijah and God at Mount Horeb. So tomorrow, obviously, we do not have a Wednesday night singing. The congregation of Wichita Falls is going back to Wednesday night services. There will be a service live stream. We're going to have our class and our short exhortation and so forth Wednesday night. For our members, the live stream will be available for them. So our next daily devotional will be Thursday at 6:30, Lord willing. I forgot to fix that on my end screen here. So just remember, we will not have a singing tomorrow night at 7. It will have our regular service at 7. All right, everybody, y'all take care. Lord willing, I'll see you Thursday.